welcome into the Raw You're Wrong Fantasy Football Podcast, Brian. Today is Running Down the Running Backs, episode 9 of our little podcast, episode 2 of the 2021 offseason. So today we're examining the top 10 projected running backs of the 2020 season because several months ago, we all had high hopes for these guys. Some of them disappointed, some of them succeeded. So we're going to be looking at who actually finished in the top 10 due to performances, injuries, and breakouts. And then we're going to do some really early top 10 projections for 2021. But I just want to cover a few important news points in the NFL so far. So since our last podcast, the Eagles have fired Doug Peterson. Wentz might stay. How do you feel about that? For me, I really just want to avoid Philly's offense for the meantime.
If Philly's smart, they'll just keep Jalen Hurts and dump Carson Wentz. Carson Wentz should just go and fill the Indianapolis Colts starting job because Philip Rivers is going to be gone this year. But if they end up keeping Wentz, this would be not the first time they mess up. This would be the second time after the whole Nick Foles Super Bowl thing.
Exactly. So, Carson, just do us all a favor and just leave Philly already. So, the Falcons have hired Titans OC Arthur Smith. If Arthur Smith brings over their play style that relies on a very important singular running back off of play action with big receivers, so that could mean good things for Julio Jones and Calvin Ridley specifically. But they currently have Todd Gurley. Do you see them moving on from Todd Gurley this season?
Well, towards the end of the season, they started using Ito Smith more and more. So I wouldn't be surprised if they move on from Todd Gurley just so they don't have to pay him, and then opens up spots for people, free agent running backs like Aaron Jones and all the others that are currently free agents.
Right. I think Aaron Jones probably fits them the best because he's probably the best overall running back who's going to be in free agency. When it comes to downhill running, that might be a few options, but Aaron Jones definitely has the best pass catching ability of all the big names who would be on the market. So the Jets have hired 49ers defensive coordinator Robert Saleh. Does that have any fantasy relevant news?
It's a great coaching ad, that's for sure. It's probably the best coach they've had in the last 15 years. Robert Saleh is, if not the best defensive coordinator in the entire NFL, and now he's going to turn that Jets team around, hopefully on the defensive side. If that offense can start clicking with Darnold, you got Crowder bringing a new receiver in the offseason. They could be a very, very good team.
But in general, just it doesn't impact your view of Darnold or Crowder. Yeah. What about Urban Meyer? I'm not a big college football guy. You are. The Jags hire him as their head coach. Is there any kind of thing about Urban Meyer that should impact fantasy at all?
I mean, Urban Meyer's been a winning coach in college football for the last 20 years. So, I guess you could say it's a pretty big impact. But at the same time, it's the Jags are already so bad, you can only go up from here. So if he does well, he's going to be praised. If he doesn't do well, it's okay, well, the Jags organization just sucks in general.
Okay. Now, speaking of what is on everyone's minds, the conference games this weekend. We'll start off with the one that's fun to talk about, the Chiefs versus the Bills. Your guy all season long was Josh Allen. You feeling like he can pull up the upset over Patty Mahomes?
Number one fantasy player in the entire league, Josh Allen. Everyone hated on him. I took him at the 7th quarterback taken, I believe, and he's just continued to beat every single person he's played. I just don't know why people sleep on the Bills every time they play them because they put up 30 to 40 points every time.
I think it's because people have this memory of the Bills of just being at the bottom of the AFC East, but now Josh Allen's legit. He has proven time and time again. And with the addition of Stephon Diggs, it's a great duo that they have going on.
And with Jon and Bryan back too, and Cole Beasley's been great. They just don't have a run game. That's their only problem. But their defense does step up.
Yeah, well, Josh Allen is their run game, pretty much.
True. Within the 5 yards, Josh Allen just runs it in whenever he wants to.
Right, and even with Mahomes still in concussion protocol, there's no way he doesn't play this weekend, right?
I feel like Mahomes will play. Just they'll say that he's not actually injured, but he'll probably still play with a concussion and get cleared somehow. But at the same time, the Chiefs are the heavy favorites, but I would not sleep on the Bills, and especially at 6-point favorites this week.
Yeah, I think it's gonna be a very close, tight game. I think one team will be trying to come back, and they're going to make a vital mistake and probably end up losing by 2 possessions. So at the end of the game, it won't look close, but it'll feel close to the full 60 minutes.
I agree.
So talking about the matchup, I don't want to talk about because I don't like one of the main quarterbacks, but the Buccaneers versus the Packers in Lambeau, got some snow coming in. How do you think the Tampa Bay Bucs are going to handle the snow? I know that Tom Brady can handle the snow, but can the Buccaneers handle the snow?
That's actually a good point. I don't know if the Buccaneers can handle the snow. Tom Brady can handle the snow, that's for sure. But on the flip side, it's like last time Bucs Packers played each other, what was it, 38-10?
I know, it's like one of those, like the Packers came out hot and then just got steamrolled down in Tampa.
And it's Tom Brady in a championship game.
Right.
Tends to win those. I would not be surprised if the Bucs won, but I also would not be shocked to see Devontae Adams put up 150 and 3 and just absolutely torch the Bucs.
Right. I think the Packers are hoping for snow because their team has shown that they can play very well in the snow as they demolish the Titans. I'd be worried about the offensive line of the Buccaneers not being great. The Green Bay pass rush, the Smith brothers, disrupting Brady. And then I don't know how well Leonard Fournette or Ronald Jones would do the snow because we know that Aaron Jones on the other side, combined with the giant of A.J. Dillon, will just mow over the defense if it's a heavy snow game.
Yeah, A.J. Dillon got hurt last game. I don't know if he's going to be cleared to play this week. I'm not sure about his update. But on the flip side, I think that Ronald Jones actually will have a pretty good game. The way he runs, he just runs so hard. And against the number one worst run defense in the entire NFL, I wouldn't be surprised if he has 102 maybe.
Right.
Fournette kind of takes the backseat on this one.
It's going to be, I think it's totally weather dependent, but like if it snows, I give the edge to Green Bay. If it doesn't snow, I give the edge to Tampa.
Yeah, I agree. But then again, you gotta count for Tom Brady and watch him come out and blow him out by 30, which I wouldn't be surprised.
But yeah, you have to be up by 3 possessions to even feel remotely comfortable in the fourth quarter against Brady.
Why is that? 28-3?
Yeah, it's if someone learned the hard way, 28-3. It's happened a few times this season.
Oh yeah.
So to get back on track, the top 10 running backs going into 2020 for their average, in order of the average draft positions of each one: Christian McCaffrey at 1, Saquon at 2, Zeke at 3, Alvin Kamara at 5, Derrick Henry at 6, Dalvin Cook at 7, Joe Mixon at 9, Nick Chubb at 12, Clyde at 14, and Josh Jacobs at 15. Now, out of that list, we all know what happened with Christian McCaffrey and Saquon Barkley. And then Joe Mixon went down early in the season. So Christian McCaffrey finished as the running back 54, Saquon as the running back 120, and Joe Mixon as the running back 49. Now I kind of got him highlighted in like a yellow color, but Clyde didn't like finish as poorly as he like was drafted. He finished around running back 22, but that's not what you want picking him in the top 15 guys in general.
Yeah. Are you talking about Clyde in general right now?
Yeah, so I mean, like, feel free. We can start off with Clyde for the 2020 disappointments.
Clyde, I've actually looked at stats before in the past, and the Chiefs with Andy Reid or anyone with Andy Reid, they've always had a 1,000-yard runner, and I know Clyde's been hurt, but the production that he put up this year was just not what they were expecting from him. And I think that's why they brought in Le'Veon, and Le'Veon's not good by any means.
Yeah.
But I think that there's such a pass-heavy offense now, and they're trying to adapt to the pass-heavy styled offenses that are rolling through the league right now. I mean, you got the Packers who are absolutely just killing people through the air. You got the Bucs killing people through the air. Bills top in efficiency for just passing in general. And then you got the Chiefs now. So I think the run game is slowly starting to go away, and they had higher hopes for Clyde, but in reality, he's not that good.
I want to believe that, I mean, that first game against the Texans, he came out like everyone was like, oh, great, the Chiefs found another guy. But when they got to the red zone, he couldn't punch it in. But I want to believe that's because the Chiefs' offensive line wasn't strong enough on the goal line, because every single time in that game, Clyde had to fight through 1 or 2 defenders to get to the line of scrimmage. So I think that also helps contribute to Kansas City's leaning towards a pass-heavy offense because they can't run block as well anymore.
Yeah.
It's kind of like a mixed bag because there were games where Clyde killed it, had over 100 total yards and a touchdown or so. But then were those games where Clyde would get 40 yards, he'd get a touchdown, but then it'd be called back on a penalty too many times, more than once, which was really hurting him. And then once they signed Bell, it totally just killed his upside.
Yeah, I wouldn't expect too much from him next year, too. I mean, going into next year, he's going to be a low RB2 at best. But with even that, you don't even feel good about drafting him, especially with all the people he has around him.
Right. If the Chiefs just do away with Le'Veon Bell, would he be raised higher in your eyes, or would he still be around that low RB2 range?
Well, I think you got to take a risk on him just because that offense is so dominant. And how do you know that, all right, Mahomes got his first serious injury, we might want to protect him a little bit better, stop passing the ball, make sure he doesn't drop back, and give our running back, 15 to 20 carries.
Right.
But at the same time, people forget about Damian Williams too.
Exactly.
Because he's going to be coming back next year because he opted out to COVID. So could change something.
It's going to be really interesting. So the sad story for the entire season that you took part of, the Christian McCaffrey injury. So as we talked about in our last episode, he's still definitely overall the number one pick. He's an elite running back regardless of who's playing quarterback. But I think the big question is that we also discussed last time is you got to draft his backup now because you can't have that kind of hole in your roster and not get his backup giving you some level of production.
Yeah. I mean, you definitely do have to draft Mike Davis going into the next season if you were to take Christian McCaffrey with the top 3 pick. And if I get the number 1 pick, I'm probably going to end up taking McCaffrey because the man came back from injury, dropped 35 points in one game, and got hurt again. It was a bad season that he came back too early. He got hurt again. He was banged up, but I think a full off season of trying to, really get himself together, he's going to come back, potentially be another top 3 player.
Right. Another running back. He always somehow finishes the past few years being picked in the top 10 of players overall. Joe Mixon. He has the talent to be the guy, but it just hasn't come to life in Cincinnati. We lost this year, Joe Mixon, due to injury. So how do you feel about him? Let's say you're in the back half of the draft. You're sitting at pick 8, pick 9. Is Joe Mixon your first pick?
No, definitely not. I think Joe Mixon is very good. He has the ability to be good. I think with Joe Burrow, T. Higgins, Tyler Boyd, Joe Mixon, they got a high-powered offense, but at the same time as he's been injured for the last 3 seasons, can you trust a guy to go a full 16 games and win you a fantasy championship? I don't think you can trust him as your number 1 pick.
Was he injured, not this year that just finished, but the year before? Because wasn't it a lot of the Cincinnati Bengals were just so abysmal, they just didn't give him the ball enough times? And because he still finished with over 1,100 yards and 6 touchdowns because they realized if we give Joe Mixon the ball 30 times a game, good things happen.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I think that they gave him the ball so much and they kind of weared him out, and then now the injuries are starting to pile on and on and on. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if we see Joe Mixon play another 2 seasons, 1 more injury, and who knows, it could be his career.
Right. Now, speaking of a guy who had so much promise his first year, has lost his second and third year now to injuries, Saquon Barkley. He is the quote-unquote generational talent, would go 2nd overall if he was fully healthy. On the abysmal offense of the Giants, kind of sitting around that 5 or 6 pick right now because people are getting a little scared of that injury past. Would you go wide receiver or would you still take Saquon at 5?
That's a tough one.
Yeah,
I would consider Devontae Adams in that spot.
That's the thing, is it because basically the first assumed picks are McCaffrey, Kamara, Cook, Henry. You're sitting there at 5, Saquon or Adams.
It's a tough decision. I mean, I would probably take Saquon because I think that Saquon will come back. The Giants are getting a little bit better. I don't know if he's going to get injured again, and I don't think he is going to get injured again. I mean, he's had some fluke injuries. It's not like he's a injury-prone guy. It's like McCaffrey comes out here. What did he do to his first injury? It was some with his leg, and then he comes back. And he gets another injury.
He gets a shoulder injury, I think.
And that's just Barkley doesn't go down like that. The man's got quads for days.
Right.
I'll trust a big running back like that, and I would draft him just for the sake of him being top 3 potential.
Because I think wasn't his first injury year too. It was a foot injury where he wasn't fully knocked out of the season, but he basically missed the majority. And then if you somehow made playoffs, he won you your playoff games because he crushed the Washington football team week 16. But last year was a totally he's done. It was an ACL, right?
Yeah, it was ACL.
So do we have any do you believe in the running back coming back from the ACL and still having a fantastic season?
I mean, look at Adrian Peterson.
True, he killed it.
And his favorite player is Adrian Peterson. He talks. There's a video of him talking about. He's on the sidelines. He's like, "Hey, did you ever watch those AP highlights when he ran for 2,000 yards?" He's like, "No." He's like, "I used to watch those every single day, and that's where I get my motivation from." I'm like, all right, well, that's a good mindset right there. He'd probably be a pretty good running back at the end of his career.
Do you, same thing with Christian McCaffrey, are you picking his backup in round 9 too?
Who would it be? Wayne Gallman?
Most likely Wayne Gallman. Yeah. Just because out of Wayne Gallman, I think Deion Lewis still stays as that rotational guy, but I'd see them moving on from Freeman.
Yeah, no, they'll probably keep Gallman, and Gallman was decent for some weeks. I mean, he was really touchdown dependent, but it's you replace Gallman with Barkley, you're getting 150 and a touchdown instead of Gallman's 60 yards and a touchdown. So I guess you do have to take him, but you don't have to push for it because he's going to be way, way, way later in the draft.
Yeah, there was one game where Godwin could have finished with 30 points. So against Seattle, it was hard to watch. He literally had 120 yards rushing. When get to like the red zone, get too tired, and then they throw in was Alfred Morris at the
Morris.
Yeah, Alfred Morris would come in and steal both goal line touchdowns. So that could have been a huge game for him.
That's brutal.
All right, so some other notable disappointments. These are guys that finished in the running back 11 to 20 range. People had big hopes for Miles Sanders on the Eagles. Average draft position was running back 14, finished RB 23, mainly because he was injured and his team just played poorly around him, which really limited potential upside. Austin Eckler, average draft position was running back 12, finished as RB 26, but we can basically blame this on that almost season-ending injury he had in week 3 against the Bucs. He could have finished that game with like 30 points, but instead sat on IR for about 2.5 months. Todd Gurley, not a lot. If you knew fantasy, you knew not to draft Todd Gurley. His average draft position was the running back 15. He finished as the running back 29. Had that brilliant first half of the season where the man would just fall into the end zone, but once that injury came back, he was just totally useless.
Todd Gurley is not good at football.
No, his body won't let him be good at football.
Yeah, his body will not let him. He is not the Todd Gurley that ran for or had 21 touchdowns in a season 3 years ago. They went to the Super Bowl. That is not the same Todd Gurley. He is injury prone. Never draft him. He's the worst running back to have. But on the flip side, he also said Miles Sanders, and I like Miles Sanders. I think he's a good person. I don't think he's a good football player. I just think that the Eagles are just such an atrocious organization. I think that they will be a little bit better, but what's better than like a 6-10 team from the Eagles potentially winning the division? I can trust Miles Sanders as my RB2, but people are gonna shoot for him. I know that he's like a big draft stock next year in fantasy drafts because the potential that they could be better this season, but I'm just not a Miles Sanders person, and I don't think I'll ever draft him.
If Miles Sanders is sitting at that range, I'm looking for probably one of the other more pass catching backs, like an Austin Eckler that has more upside in that group.
With a new offensive coordinator coming into the Chargers too, Austin Eckler probably will be 10 times better than he was last year too.
Exactly.
So I expect Herbert to be just a monster.
So 2 other disappointments that are probably going to be trending in the opposite, continuing to go down. Chris Carson, average draft position was running back 16, finished as RB 19, but he was basically injured for that main portion of the season. James Conner, average draft position running back 17, finished as RB 27, got injured, and then the Steelers just forgot how to run the ball. So I think James Conner has definitely got to be out of the picture at this point in Pittsburgh. Chris Carson, he was in a contract year. Right now, honestly, I don't know what the Seahawks do. As a Seahawks fan, I love Chris Carson, but I don't know. Like, I could easily see them just having him be a cap penalty and just moving on from the guy.
Yeah, I can see that too. I mean, Chris Carson is good when he plays. The Seahawks just tend to lose games, and then up until the fourth quarter, they try to make a miraculous comeback and pass the ball the entire time, especially with DK and Tyler. There's not a lot of room for Chris Carson. And in the previous, in the past, they would run the ball so much. I think they were top 5 for 6-7 years with Marshawn Lynch, just in terms of carries per game.
Right.
And they've changed so much in their offense. I don't know if you trust Chris Carson depending on where he ends up. But at the same time, he's a big back. He doesn't get hurt that often. But
it's his injuries either keep him out. I feel like
it's not always serious.
Yeah. Almost I feel like his injuries this year, they just kept him out for extra time to be careful.
And then James Conner just needs to get out of Pittsburgh, just needs to leave, just never play football again.
Yeah.
Bring in Najee Harris.
He was a great Cinderella story the year Le'Veon sat out. He still had a fantastic year, finished as the RB6 that year, but then anytime you've drafted him after that, you just had a rough time having him on your team.
Yeah, I mean, amazing story from James Conner coming back from all his adversity in his past, but that man just needs to stop playing football because he's just not good.
So going into the guys who actually finished in the top 10 of 2020, the guys we all thought would end up there: Kamara, Cook, Henry, Aaron Jones, average draft position 14, finished as RB5. Josh Jacobs, average draft position was running back 15, finished 8 in the top 10. Didn't feel like that because of the way he would play. He would have a big bunch game and then literally a few weeks of less than 10 points. Zeke, we all know, was killing it. And then once he lost Dak, Zeke's production just fell off the map. Kareem Hunt, average draft position around 15 for running backs. Sorry, I totally messed that up later in the draft because Josh Jacobs was 15. Kareem Hunt finished as number 10 in the top 10. Mainly, I think, because Chubb missed a portion of the season, so that just gave Kareem Hunt a lot more reps than he was expecting. Still a great RB2, but he's definitely not going to be a top 10 next year if he stays in Cleveland with Chubb.
Yeah, I mean, Kareem Hunt's an amazing running back. It's just unfortunate that he has to play alongside Nick Chubb. Josh Jacobs, I said I would never draft him after the fast one he tried to pull a couple weeks ago.
Yeah.
We're saying that he wasn't going to play, and then he ends up playing and puts up like 15 points. So if he doesn't like fantasy players, then he doesn't deserve a spot on my team.
So the thing is, I totally understand that, but if because of that he falls and I can get Josh Jacobs as my RB2,
oh yeah,
I'm taking that all day.
100%. I mean, Josh Jacobs is going to produce. He's still up there, top 15 running back. They love Devontae Booker for some reason, but I feel like Josh Jacobs still gets his production here and there, and he will score touchdowns, and that was his problem last year. He didn't score enough touchdowns.
It was a lot of I think the Raiders would get too cute in the red zone. They like to pull the tight end screen to Darren Waller and just run it in with your big running back guys.
Yeah, I mean, Darren Waller takes up a lot of production in that offense, so it's kind of tough to take those touchdowns away from him.
Yeah. So 3 guys that we weren't expecting to be in the top 10 snuck in there. At running back 4, our fan favorite, David Montgomery, average draft position was 66. We both know that he will not finish in the top 10 again. The reason he's there is because his strength of schedule. Last 5 games of the season, played the 7 easiest rush defenses, or in the top 7. And it was just Mitch Trubisky, the way he plays, you need to give the ball to David Montgomery to balance that offense. He's not finishing in the top 10, but he could easily be a top 20 back, right? 15 to 20 range potentially.
He's got the skill to be there. I just don't know if Chicago's good enough to sustain him having good stats for the entire year. Again, all of his points came from those awful run defenses he played at the end of the season. Everyone sees him as a hero. Draft him early next year, and you're going to be up for a real big surprise.
Yeah, it's gonna be. Don't tell Gatsy.
Yeah, don't tell Gatsy.
So another guy who basically saved your fantasy season if you didn't draft a running back and you were able to pick him up, or if you drafted him super late, depending on how late into the season your draft was. James Robinson, average draft position was 198, finished as a running back 7. So we both know he had a breakout season in Jacksonville. Also because the projected starter going to the season got COVID twice before the season started. So week 1 was just does James Robinson do well? And if you had a high waiver request, you were able to pick him up, you were happy.
Yeah, I think going into next year too, James Robinson's going to be a very sneaky RB2 draft pick, because if they get Trevor Lawrence, that offense is only going to get better.
Right.
If they can bring in a receiver too in free agency, they have so much money in cap space. Again, James Robinson's only going to get better from there. He's already a hard runner, and Jacksonville loves to run the ball, so I would take the gamble on him and get him as your RB2 if you can.
Where do you think he'd probably go? Do you think he's going to go in round 2 or round 3 as a guy?
I have him at the ranking. They're ranking him at 21 right now. I think it's a little low for him, but I would say probably 20 to 15 in the running backs, but I would even push towards 15. I would take him over Dobbins, Clyde, Swift, Carson, and Drake, which they all list above him. So I would take James Robinson over all those guys. So
basically, if you start with an early draft pick, you could be looking at walking away with Christian McCaffrey or Dalvin Cook, and then you could come back in round 2 and just steal James Robinson from the league.
Definitely. And if you have McCaffrey and James Robinson, congrats, you probably made the playoffs.
Yeah. So the other guy that stuck into the top 10 in RB6, we're going to talk about him in a few minutes. Average draft position was 33, but our good friend Jonathan Taylor basically had so much potential. Colts just refused to use him, and then end of season has this giant breakout. But if you had to rely on him at all, you probably weren't in playoffs by the time he had his big games.
Yeah, I mean, and with the exit of Phillip Rivers, it's going to be kind of tough to be able to judge how good that offense is really going to be. The defenses always stick around, but they have Hines, they have Wilkins that they both still like to use, and Jonathan Taylor only exploded at the end of the season. Jonathan Taylor is good at football. It just, is the Colts good enough to get him the production that you want from him? And we saw it from weeks, honestly, 4 to 10. He put up less than like 10 points in like 4 or 5 of those games. Like, you can't have that production and then suddenly blow up and expect that he's going to do it an entire season. I just don't see it.
Yeah, I think it, like, depending on how the Colts use this offseason, and like, you'd have to really pay attention to the beat reporters and what's going on during the preseason to see if is he worth a risk. For me, if he's top of the second round, back into the first round, I'm avoiding him completely.
Yeah, I'm not going to draft him. Some lucky person might draft him out there, and he might have a good season. He might not. I just don't have any faith in the man.
Is this with how high he's going to go? I will take the risk just passing on his talent completely.
I like taking running backs that don't have another guy in the backfield to share carries with. And when you have Hines playing in the passing down role when they're losing games, Colts don't lose many games. They're usually in a tough game. But when they are losing, they put in Hines for that passing down back. And Jonathan Taylor kind of came alive in the passing down game at the very end of the season, but I still trust Hines in those situations rather than Taylor.
So we all know he's going to get overdrafted, but realistically, where would you take Jonathan Taylor? What round would you say you'd feel comfortable taking him in?
What round? Probably like back in third round, maybe.
Yeah, if I can walk away with a top running back and a top receiver in 1 and 2.
And take Jonathan Taylor,
Yeah, he's like, he may or may not be, he'll be a low-end RB2 most of the season, but he does have the talent and offensive line to be an RB1.
If you're stuck in a situation where you have to take Jonathan Taylor and he falls very far down the draft board, then yes, take him. But if you shoot too high for Jonathan Taylor, then you just lost.
Yeah. So other notable breakouts, these are guys that finished 11 to 20. Mike Davis was drafted as the running back 100, finished as the running back 12 because Christian McCaffrey got hurt. Antonio Gibson, we're going to have an entire Antonio Gibson episode in the future.
Oh, I will not be participating.
So average draft position, running back 43, finished as the running back 13, had an amazing end of season breakout after the bye week. Had an easy schedule when it came to rushing defenses, but he kind of missed the back half of the fantasy playoffs due to a really sad turf toe he's suffered versus the Steelers. Nyheim Hines, average draft position, running back 53, finished as the running back 15. As we mentioned, they used him a lot more instead of Jonathan Taylor during the middle of the season. And just to place out of the Colts, he was the pass-catching guy. Same thing for J.D. McKissick. Running back in 91 drafted, finished as running back 17. The Redskins always being down, not trusting the rookie. They wanted McKissick in. He would get about 10 looks a game for catches, which is insane if you're playing PPR, half PPR for a running back that far down. DeAndre Swift, running back 29, finished as running back 18. He had those like breakout games, but kind of disappeared towards the end of the season due to injury. Ronald Jones, running back 33, finished as the RB20. I think he outplayed expectations. Everyone assumed that Leonard Fournette was just going to completely take over, but Ronald Jones said not too fast. But the problem, as always in Tampa Bay, you never really felt comfortable knowing who's going to be the running back.
Yeah, I mean, Leonard Fournette has shown time and time again that he is the passing down back. They use him frequently, and then they love to go to Ronald Jones. When Ronald Jones gets hot, they turn to him immediately. As soon as Ronald Jones starts acting up or he fumbles or whatever it may be because he's a turnover machine, They just go back to Leonard Fournette. So you can never really trust those two running backs, and I wouldn't even consider both of them going into next year's draft unless you're trying to bench stash them. But other than that, you talked about Antonio Gibson too. Antonio Gibson is probably the only relevant RB2 that you would actually take. All the other guys are just
RB1, right?
RB1, no, I would say mid RB2.
Okay.
Maybe. Depending on who's the quarterback. If it's Taylor Heinicke, I don't know. Maybe they turn the season around. They win the NFC East for second year in a row. But the Washington is just so streaky.
It's totally quarterback dependent at the moment.
It is. If you put in, I don't even know who they're going to get at quarterback. They probably might draft someone. They might do Heinicke. They might do Alex Smith.
I think that's the part that hurts their team the most since they're the NFC East team that made playoffs they now have a much worse draft pick than all the other teams that need quarterbacks. So, like, they're not going to get the quarterback they need in the draft to potentially mold into their guy.
Yeah, but I don't think they're too upset because they got Chase Young. They got their guy. He is the guy. So we'll see, how they play out this year. And then again, you'd always find a lucky charm in the draft, and you don't have to get him in the top 15 and, turns into Tom Brady, who's a 6th-round draft pick.
Yeah, that analogy is never going to die. So, trying to project the top 10 running backs for 2021, I've got a list of 7: McCaffrey, Dalvin Cook, Derrick Henry, Alvin Kamara, Saquon Barkley, Nick Chubb, Ezekiel Elliott. I don't have an 8, 9, or 10 yet. Right now I've got names floating there. Josh Jacobs, Joe Mixon, Aaron Jones, Austin Eckler. There's a lot of factors that could go into how those 4 fall out. Like, who do you feel could fill out 8, 9, and 10 for projected top 2021 running backs?
I think you have to trust Zeke again just because of how good he's been when Dak plays. And I think that the Cowboys are a good team. They have a very high-powered offense. So I think you'd have to trust Zeke going in with 8. 9, 10.
Well, I've got Zeke at 7.
Oh, you have Zeke at 7. Okay, well, 8, then you're going down to your Josh Jacobs, Aaron Jones, Joe Mixon, Eckler. I mean, I would trust Eckler especially if you're playing in a PPR league, because the amount of catches that guy gets is just ridiculous. The touchdowns don't come, but then again, touchdowns could be different for next year. And
exactly, you never know.
Explodes for 8 touchdowns, then the man has 60, 70 grabs too. It's like, that's so huge for PPR. Josh Jacobs, Joe Mixon, I think it's says for itself that both of them are kind of a toss-up. And then Aaron Jones is, depending on where he goes, if he goes to the Falcons, if he stays with Green Bay somehow. I don't think he's staying with Green Bay, but I feel like he's very team-dependent on how his production is going to be for 2021.
Right. I think for fantasy players, it's best if he leaves Green Bay. For the player and teams themselves, I think, like, if Green Bay keeps them, they've got a 3-headed monster running back.
Yeah, I think they like A.J. Dillon a lot, though. So I think they'll roll with A.J. Dillon and Jamal Williams and kind of go for the Super Bowl this year. If Super Bowl doesn't happen, I don't expect the Packers to be back there again. It's probably the end of Rodgers. But if they do win the Super Bowl, maybe they're just like, all right, let's bring him back. Let's dump some of these other guys on our team and try to make room for him. But he also, I've heard, is asking for a lot of monies, and I don't think the Packers have the cap space to be able to pay him.
He's going to be a cap hit.
Yeah.
So we got some other running backs that we got to talk about where they might go. So we've got like our maybe top 10. So we discussed Jonathan Taylor, going to go too high, but back of the 3rd round would be good. Where do you see Antonio Gibson going? My gut says a late 4th round, early 5th round.
Yeah, probably around there. Probably 15 to 20 RBs. He's definitely a back-end RB2. I mean, he's shown himself when healthy that he can produce. He could be an RB1 if he is healthy. But yeah, I would probably take him around there. And if you do steal him earlier than that, I wouldn't be upset with the pick. It's just a gamble at that point.
Right.
Depending on how the offense is actually going to play out. We'll see how it works out for you.
About David Montgomery. I've got him like 5th round.
Yeah, 5th rounds. Someone's going to bite on him early. Someone's going to bite on him early. So don't even expect him on either of our teams.
Yeah, basically.
Someone's going to take him in the 4th round and be like, oh, well, Dave Montgomery was so good at the end of the season. He was the best fantasy running back like throughout all the playoffs. Like, no, it's like read a book. Just understand how that offense works.
Right.
Who they were playing against, and then come back to me with some stats, and I'll show you.
Who knows who the Bears quarterback is, because it's up to the Bears to re-sign Mitch for next year if they want him.
Yeah, I mean, the Bears are just they're sneaky good. They also are losing Allen Robinson too, so that just makes them 10 times worse as well. Man who catches 8 to 10 balls a game. Now who you got to throw to? You got Mims, who's fighting people on the field left and right.
Exactly. So James Robinson, we think he's going to go early 3rd round. Clyde, 4th round maybe.
Yeah.
Okay, another guy who almost could have won championships, Cam Akers. Feels like right now, like what they showed at the end of the season, he seems like to now be the guy instead of like that rotation they were doing at the beginning of the season. I feel like he's going to go in the 3rd round just because of the hype of a Rams running back. Seems like they moved on from trying to do the trio. How do you feel? Like, do you think 3rd round is too high for Cam Akers?
No, I think Cam Akers could potentially have that Todd Gurley role that Todd Gurley had a couple of years ago on the Rams. McVay does love his running backs, but then again, who knows that they don't sign another running back? They have a quad running back system going on, and then Cam Akers just throwing the dust. Like, you really don't know with the Rams, and that's kind of the terrible thing about Cam Akers, because you could draft him. Next thing you know, he's benched for 2 games, and you're like, all right, where's my RB1 that I wanted? And
exactly.
You don't know what's going to happen.
So where do you think he should go?
Probably, I would put him in the same tier as like Antonio Gibson, right around that range of RBs. They're both risky takes, but I would trust Gibson over Akers if I had to choose one.
So I think probably he's going to go mid to early 4th round, because I think people are going to remember Akers a little bit more than Gibson when it comes to draft season.
Yeah, John will probably take him again, so we don't have to really worry about that.
Miles Sanders, I have him falling to like 4th round right now. Do you think he falls further, or do you think he sits right there with those other guys?
He sits right there with those other guys, I think. Again, we already talked about Miles Sanders. You know how I feel about him.
Right.
I don't think too highly of him, but if you want to take a gamble on him, thinking that the Eagles' offense is going to be better than it was last year, then so be it.
Speaking of a guy you took a gamble on, he's in a fantastic offense. Sneak, like, having him didn't feel great, but he finished as running back 12 on the season. Kenyon Drake.
He gets 20 carries a game. I will take a running back that gets 20 carries a game. He started getting more goal line carries towards the end of the season. I might not draft him again next year, but at the same time, the Cardinals have a very good offense. They let up a lot of points on defense, always high-scoring games. Kenny Drake's due for at least a touchdown a game. Not the most in yards, but in terms of touchdowns, he gets them.
Right. I've got him in like 3rd round. Like, I could see him like mid-3rd round. He'll be like in that stretch of running backs like you don't feel great about, but if you need a running back, you probably should take him at that point.
Yeah, I mean, it also depends on how they play Chase Edmonds next year, too. It's like if they come out and they're like, all right, we're going to do a 50-50 split, then if that's news that breaks up before your draft, you might want to take that into consideration, because Chase Edmonds is kind of lethal when in the passing game, but at the same time, Kenny Drake did produce well enough to stay around, but I don't know how that offense is going to work out.
Okay. Melvin Gordon on the Broncos. I've got him in the 5. It was a 3rd round draft pick, like late 3rd round this year. I think he's going to be like a late 4th round now for next year.
Can you name a liable Broncos offensive player?
Does the quarterback affect how I feel about them?
Sure.
Because I would say if you look at the receivers.
Was there a good Broncos player this season?
No.
Do you take Melvin Gordon early?
No. But I've got another question we can come back to then. Kareem Hunt, 4th round, or do you think he should be more of a 5th, 6th round guy?
I'm taking Kareem Hunt over Melvin Gordon all day of the week.
Okay. DeAndre Swift, 5th round or earlier?
5th round. I think that's a good spot for him. I don't know who. Did the Lions hire a new head coach? Or they still?
Yes, they did. They hired Dan Campbell from.
Oh yeah, Dan Campbell. Yeah. Okay, yeah. I mean, the Lions actually might not be too bad, but Marvin and Galladay are both free agents this year. So depending on how their offense all comes together before the start of the season, we'll really judge how Swift does, because Swift is good. He has a lot of talent. The Lions just suck a lot.
All right, my last guy, Chris Carson. Depends on the team. Like, I don't know what team he's going to be on, honestly. Where would you take him?
Probably a high-end RB3, maybe. I don't know. He's a tough player to watch, because Seattle, when they run the ball a lot, again, Carson's very good. But at the same time, the injuries kind of flare on throughout the season. And I don't really, maybe back end 5, top 6.
Right. So let me ask a tougher question. A lot of people like to go wide receiver heavy draft strategy. Let's say like you go Devontae Adams, you maybe pick up a tight end or another, like let's say you go Devontae Adams, Keenan Allen, you in the 3rd round, out of the guys we just listed, who's your RB1?
If I had, that's a tough one, actually. I mean, hopefully Gibson or somewhere, or even James Robinson's.
Yes, but like basically, if James Robinson if you go receiver, and James Robinson is still there, you need to take James Robinson. But if you don't, your RB1 is, you're looking at Gibson, Montgomery, Clyde, Cam Akers, Kenyon Drake. That's why I asked how you felt about like a Melvin Gordon or Kareem Hunt. Like, who out of those guys, who do you feel safe with? Or does this question make you realize you have to pick a running back in one or two?
Yeah, no, you do need to take a running back in one or two. You cannot have that. You definitely need to take a running back with your first two picks because they do go quick. Because once it gets lower down the totem pole, it's not pretty tough.
It's a lot more hit or miss on those guys.
It is. And you could trust like Swift or Montgomery. Like you could gamble on Montgomery thinking that he's going to have a better season than normal. I just don't see it happening, but I would suggest that you probably do pick a running back in your first two picks.
Right. So some late round running backs to pay attention to. A.J. Dillon on the Packers. If Aaron Jones does go, he could be like a gem like in the rough in that back end. I think if there's no Aaron Jones, I would take A.J. Dillon in the 7th or 8th round.
I agree. And I also think the sleeper of just the rankings I'm looking at is like, Myles Gaskin at 33.
He's the next on my list.
Why is Myles Gaskin not a questionable RB2 here?
Exactly.
I'd take him over Kenyon Drake. I'd take him over a lot of running backs. This man has produced 15 to 20 points every single time he's been on the field. I don't get why he's underestimated.
I think it's just because people imagine the Dolphins, he's this undrafted free agent guy, just happened to be in the right place, right time. But I see the Dolphins sticking with him if they don't sign or draft another running back. And honestly, he's probably not going to go to like 7th, 8th round, but I mean, like his production could be like 3rd or 4th round pick.
And that's another guy you could steal in the draft too. If you go running back, receiver, and now you're stuck and you don't know what to do, and it's like all these running backs are already taken. It's like, who do you have to go to? It's like you could go with Melvin Gordon, or you could take Myles Gaskin. I think I'm taking Myles Gaskin 10 times out of 10 over Melvin Gordon.
Right. These two backfields, super crowded, miserable to pick a guy in, but you might get production. The Bills backfield and the 49ers backfield, what are you going to make of those names and those guys?
The Bills don't have a backfield. So
right. So you're totally just avoiding Singletary and Moss?
Just throw that away. Devin Singletary or Zach Moss are not relevant. 49ers.
I have right now, look, Mostert or Wilson.
Mostert's good. Mostert is good when he plays, but we haven't really seen a full season from Mostert.
Right.
In 2 years now. So Jeff Wilson's kind of sneaking his way into that little rotation that they have going on, stealing more touchdowns. But Mostert usually goes off for a couple games this season and just completely falls off. So you can't really trust them either. So I wouldn't suggest going with either. But Mostert's clearly the guy if you have to draft anyone.
If you had to, let's say you're sitting there in the 8th round, would you take one to just put on your bench when you don't know who to pick at that point?
Yeah, probably. Definitely not Singletary or Moss. I would never draft any of those guys. The Bills can be up 30 points and they still pass the ball.
What about whoever ends up being the Steelers running back?
Hopefully, it's Harris. So
Najee Harris?
We'll see if Najee actually comes.
So if Najee Harris gets drafted by the Steelers, they move on from Connor, what round do you take Harris in?
That's a tough one. I don't know. I think he's probably skyrocket. He's probably like a 5th rounder, honestly. He might even be like a top 15 running back in projections. I wouldn't doubt it. He's that level talent. And with the Steelers, we've seen running backs do very well in that offense. I would not doubt if we see Najee Harris at the very top of the leaderboard.
Would he be someone you're trying to basically get as your RB2 for the season?
Oh, yeah. I would love him as my RB2, but if I had to go with, if I'm at that point in the draft where Najee's on the board and there's literally no one else, like a Melvin Gordon, I would probably take the gamble on Najee over someone like Melvin.
All right. Asking someone that's not a Seahawks fan, if Chris Carson is not re-signed, how do you feel about Rashad Penny?
Don't like him.
Don't like him?
Don't like him. I mean, if he's clearly if he's the only running back there, you have to draft him just for the production's sake, but I've never seen anything great from Rashad Penny. I know you're a Seahawks fan, so you probably can do a further in-depth analysis of what Rashad Penny's like.
So, for me, just to touch on that, Rashad Penny has shown the flashes that he has the talent, but has never really figured it out. His rookie season, broke his hand in the preseason, so he took a back seat all year. Second season, had a few games where he's starting to come alive. ACL, just done. So, this is year 3. Well, and I think if they move on from Carson, it's a good sign. I'd take Rashad late 5th, 6th round kind of move. If I've already got 2 running backs, 2 receivers. I'm kind of like, I don't like the group of guys. If he's in the 6th round, I'll take him, put him on my bench kind of situation, but only if they move on from Carson.
Yeah, he could be a sleeper only if Carson leaves, but I kind of want them, bring back the CJ Procise days. That's what I want them to see.
He's getting back from the Texans?
Oh, yeah.
I still remember that time the Seattle came to New England and played the Patriots, and CJ Procise had 152 yards, and it's like, we finally got the guy, but he's made of glass.
There is always one guy that kills the Patriots every year. I'm not surprised it's CJ Procise.
Yeah. So, final remarks. Make sure to like, subscribe, and share. It's never too early to start paying attention to next year. Follow the news every few weeks. Some hires might make a difference. Do you have any final points, Brian?
I think I'm good.
So, before we end the episode, how do we pick a third guy? Because we lost Jon, who has retired. Not that big of a loss. We don't have to deal with him gloating. Who do you think what should we do for picking a new one?
I think maybe someone comments on the video and chooses who they want to see next on the video. It might not be a solidified spot, but we could have some guest people come in here and there, just talk about different episodes. So
we take little notes on them?
We can take a little bit of notes on them. We'll pick out of a hat. We'll do something. We'll think about that.
Who brings the best topic to talk about?
Not many. Okay. Not many out there.
No. So what do you want to do next? You want to do receivers, quarterbacks, or tight ends?
Let's do receivers.
Right. Better topic to talk about. Probably by the time we do this next episode. And honestly, we'll probably be leading into the Super Bowl, so we can just discuss more Super Bowl stuff. Out of the 4 teams, who do you want to see in the Super Bowl?
Bills, Bucks. Definitely Bills, Bucks this season.
I really want to see Bills, Packers, but...
Oh, yeah, you're biased towards Tom Brady.
We are. So, we're going to get a... I know it's going to happen. We're going to get a Buccaneers-Chiefs game.
We probably will get a Buccaneers-Chiefs game, and Tom Brady will win his 7th Super Bowl, and you'll be crying up here just like normal.
It's not fair, but it's how we're running the podcast with just Berkey's tears.
Just Berkey's tears.
All right, so that wraps up another episode. See everyone next time.